So to wrap up our holiday season review, we're going to go a little bit darker with a old horror movie from the 80s, Silent Night, Bloody Night, and they're remade as just simply Silent Night. I'm John Chang with Dan Edmonds.
Season's greetings.
So today I'm drinking a little spice cider to kind of in the holiday spirit and stuff.
Okay, I don't have a drink actually.
Oh,
this is a terrible.
That's a travesty.
I know. What's happened? What's my drink on this week? But anyway, too many headaches from Christmas parties and things. That's the problem.
Right. So I thought the question that might be, an interesting one for today is, where do we kind of draw the line between exploitation and then this idea of a freedom of, art and expression and stuff? And the reason why I kind of asked that, of course, is, quite a bit of the controversy around the release of Silent Night, Bloody Night was like, all these protests about, making horror about, Christmas and stuff. And what's funny is even before this was made, there had been other movies, like Black Christmas was, of course, made before this, as we've talked about in the past. So, where do we kind of draw the line?
Yeah, and as also we should mention, because I watched the wrong movie before we did this video, which was Silent Night, Bloody Night, which was 1972, which is actually an interesting one because it is, I think, the first horror movie with the POV perspective.
Right.
But anyway, we'll do that one another time, I guess. But but yeah, you're right. I mean, there was at least two other Christmas-related horror movies. We had Halloween. It's like this. There's no reason why this one should have been picked out over others for picking a particular holiday.
I mean, even Siskel and Ebert, like they really kind of talked directly into the camera, kind of criticizing the studios and all the people involved and stuff like that. And it called them out, hey, what's called, what are you doing? Like kind of, making this kind of exploitation and, it's really a bad taste and, on and on and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's quite clever about this movie is it is quite self-conscious. And I think horror movies in the 80s weren't trying to be kind of meta or self-conscious a lot of the time. They were literally just trying to deliver scares in whatever was the most sincerest way possible, given the budget possible. And this one definitely is quite tongue-in-cheek. It almost feels, at times a bit like a trauma movie or something, which is about the closest thing you could say was kind of more kind of self-knowing. But I mean, again, it's kind of like, I think it does genuinely take this concept of, Christmas is a time when everyone's feeling all sort of holly and jolly and family warmth. And, we want to subvert your expectations with that by giving us a killer Santa Claus. So, I mean, yeah, it's exploitative, but no more exploitative than A Man in the Mask at Halloween is, or any number of other horror movies for that matter, really.
Yeah, it's interesting that the director in this case, he actually was associated. He actually wrote and created the television series Life and Times of Grizzly Adams, which it's kind of like pretty much going from like Disney or like Hallmark kind of series and stuff like that to like this kind of like you said, the trauma kind of horror and stuff like that. And I don't know if like it was like kind of, as we've seen many times, like kind of for the money, so to speak, or like what kind of really motivated. And then apparently like even on his deathbed, apparently like he was like saying like it was the one thing he regretted most, like kind of making, was this movie and stuff. So
you see, for me, this is the hallmark of a future cult classic, really, then, because I really enjoyed it. I thought this was like actually a really fun, watchable movie. For all, and it's a bit like Showgirls. It's kind of like its faults are part of its charm. It is actually pretty dark and gruesome. I mean, it's the initial family killing is pretty brutal and unrelenting, which was probably it shouldn't have been that shocking because there's a lot of 70s horror movies or thrillers that have, as we've seen, in Death Wish, very random, brutal killing that comes out of nowhere, which is exactly how this one starts as well. And so that shouldn't have really shocked Siskel and Ebert and people at that time. But I think what it is, it's just the acting is just so bad in it at times that it becomes offensive just purely through some of the execution rather than the concept, I think, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how, like, with some horror movies, like the actors really, go on to like kind of, some really great success. Like, in fact, like one of the first movies for Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger was a Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel and stuff. And as we know, like, their careers pretty much, did not take a nosedive. If anything, they took off from there. But as far as this movie's gone, like, like Silent Night, Deadly Night, like, I don't think any of the actors have gone on to do anything else.
No, there were very few survivors from this movie. One of the most interesting ones is the wife at the beginning was, of course, pretty much imprinted on my memory as the skin-tight, body-suited, Lamborghini wielding hustler from Cannonball Run.
Interesting.
She's the character Jill Rogers in Cannonball Run, along with Adrienne Barbeau.
Interesting.
I can't remember the name of the actress now. I don't have my phone with me, but
Lillian Chauvin, I guess.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's basically that, and the Cannonball Run were pretty much the only things she ever did. Yeah, and pretty the only person who really ever acted in anything else was the store manager. I think just about pretty much every other actor in that movie just disappeared.
Yeah.
Or did a few other horror movies.
Right.
Actually, no, sorry. Tiffany in it.
Oh, okay.
Actually, no, that's the remake I'm thinking of. But I think no. It's the girlfriend who gets skewered on the antlers of the deer.
Right.
She actually went on to make, I think, 168 other horror movies.
Whoa.
So, but she's the only one, and the store manager. Everyone else basically disappeared off the face of the earth. So, yeah.
I guess to kind of get back to like the story, the core story that kind of is, ultimately end up being remade, so to speak, in some shape or form, is this idea of like kind of, this boy who's kind of traumatized by witnessing the death of his parents and stuff in a very graphic and violent way and everything. And then he's his being raised in an orphanage with his brother doesn't seem to help, like kind of him, and so I guess to some degree, like one thing about, like kind of both the original remake is this kind of idea of two things, I guess. One is this idea that like kind of trauma, like kind of basically, leading you to kind of, be unhinged and stuff like that. And the other thing, like kind of, it seems like another theme is like kind of the sins of the, father or parents leading to like kind of, your own kind of demise in some way and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's this kind of trauma, and then it's this, they've got this idea that the more aggressively you suppress that trauma, it will kind of come out in some dangerous way later on. So yeah, it's kind of blame the parents for trauma kind of territory, really.
I tell you, there's not many movies where like orphanages are depicted in very, like, even like the recent, Queen's Gambit that's been all the rage and stuff like that. Orphanages tend to be very bleak places that, like, the children are abused by kind of some nuns or, otherwise and stuff. And yeah, I mean, and then for that matter, nuns are not depicted very well. Granted, my own personal experience in Catholic high school wasn't the best and stuff, but I tell you, like, they really have even more the reputation in these, movies, never mind horror movies and stuff.
Would you say, from your experience of a Catholic high school, was the Mother Superior fairly accurate in her portrayal, do you think?
Well, let's just say that like even if like they weren't abusive per se, but like they just didn't seem to really have much of a sense of humor. I guess in most cases, like you would not be approaching them to like what's called never mind like having a smart alecky kind of comment and stuff, but they wouldn't be like your drinking buddies, I guess, in any shape or form.
Yeah, I guess that's what giving up sex will do for you. Yeah. No, I mean, it was. I mean, I think what's quite interesting was that just how badly, they dealt with him in the. Yeah, just tie him up. That's clearly the right thing to do with someone who's really massively traumatized. But for me, I mean. There was lots of very odd musical bits that really made me laugh a lot in this movie.
Okay.
It was kind of like this weird kind of soul singing stuff, that gospel-y kind of stuff that was just interjected slightly at the wrong time a lot of the time. Like, the kids' parents have just been killed, and then you got this sort of weird song going, oh, sweet baby, oh, baby. And then it's just focusing on this baby that's going to be raised in an orphanage. But it was just felt a little bit too early to put that in after you'd watched a brutal killing of the parents. Right. And then, again, my absolute favorite part of this movie is when you see grown-up Billy working in the store, being like the helpful hand.
Right.
And the song is, something like, it's always better on the warm side of the door. And it's kind of there's all this kind of quite creepy lyrics saying, people are out to get you, but it's better on the warm side of the door at Christmas. and he's there just, this lovely montage of him helping old ladies and putting boxes and stuff. And then, he's made to dress up as Santa, and he starts sort of shaking his head. And it's like just really terrible acting as he just snaps and becomes a serial killer.
Right.
That for me was just really enjoyable.
Apparently, I guess they had done like kind of their versions of some different holiday songs, like because like, I guess when you're on a low budget like kind of scenario, you could actually spend like a significant budget on getting the royalties and the rights rather to or paying the royalties to put kind of more traditional holiday music and stuff like that. So to avoid that, I guess they did their own kind of versions that like you said, that doesn't really excuse, or that has nothing to do with like kind of how there is edited or interjected into the different scenes stuff.
Yeah, it was all just sounded like it was like a TV sitcom kind of music or something like that. I can't even think of a good example of it. It's just like You Got a Friend in Me or something like that. It was just really, really kind of took you out of the movie. But yeah, strange.
And here's also to me the bottom line too, that like I mean like kind of gruesome kind of killings and stuff like that. But in the end, it was more laughable overall than scary. And that's the part that I think is funniest, I guess, about the whole controversy and all that, is that it's really, to me, like it was not that dark in the sense of like kind of that that it just seemed like more that a horror movie that happened to be during Christmas than this horror movie that was like centered around the dark themes of Christmas and all that kind of stuff. At least that was to me, like having heard all the controversy, having kind of wondered what all the hubbub was about and something like that. That's the part to me was like kind of the strangest part about all this.
Yeah, there was just lots of kind of odd filmmaking choices as well that really made me laugh in this movie. I mean, there's a bit where Billy catches the nun and some random guy.
Right.
Oh, no. Sorry, that wasn't the bit. It was the bit where Billy is having the dream sequence where he's having sex with the other woman in the store.
Oh, okay.
And then gets like brutally cut down his side. But there's like this slow panning shot of quite a hairy man's butt for quite a long time on screen. And I was just saying, come on, pan up now. It's like, and I just thought you just wouldn't get that in a any kind of movie made in the last sort of 10, 15 years. So that just kind of made me laugh. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the death sequences were they were very variable depending on the abilities of the actor. They were either, you know, fairly convincing to kind of, they've just got a bad cough or something like this. It was, yeah. I
mean, what's also fascinating to me is like even Quentin Tarantino, he apparently like, you know, like did a, what's called, they quoted like, you know, he and Robert Rodriguez quoted like, you know, like some scene, you know, like kind of, you know, at one of the film festivals, you know, like kind of from this movie, because apparently this is like one of his favorite kind of movies. I mean, you know,
I can well understand that. Yeah.
And I guess I can see it from the perspective, like he's really has a thing for like kind of the grindhouse kind of, you know, kind of whole subgenre and stuff. But other than that, I mean, I guess to me, like, it just really, the funny thing is like kind of what all the fuss is about. That to me is like kind of just the most striking. That like, you know, I think the one commentary that I saw about like kind of that it was a studio spending money to basically have commercials during primetime TV where kids, you know, saw, you know, like kind of they saw what this, you know, movie that was coming, something like that. I think that was what it was come down to, is that just the fact that like, you know, it was shown during prime time, and so like these kids probably, if anything, were more curious and more wanting to see it because, you know, like, oh, I kind of, you know, something that's like kind of almost taboo, I guess, and stuff. And I think that's part, I think, is what really, like, if anything, the only conclusion I could come to as to why, you know, like kind of this is even like, you know, other than, you know, like somebody like a Quentin Tarantino, I don't really see why like kind of there's as much fuss about this movie.
Oh, I can see. I mean, I thought what's quite clever about this movie in a way, and how you can see why it kind of spurred on a lot of things like his grindhouse kind of genre, is that it is quite disarming, because some of these scenes are so ludicrous and funny that it's quite you. And then there's like a really brutal murder that's really, really gory, and it does actually it actually becomes strangely more shocking. Those scenes, it's almost like you can't totally kind of consciously process them, because you're still kind of half laughing at the, you know, someone shooting someone with a bow and arrow randomly in a store. But I have to explain that for anyone who's not seen. Our killer is hunting people down with an axe. The woman somehow gets rid of the axe, and she's just about to make it out of the store. And somehow in this store, they have a bow and arrow outside of its packaging that he can pick up and shoot within about 5 seconds. And I just thought, what store has a bow and arrow that's so readily available that you could shoot any member of the staff at any given notice? But anyway, you know, that is, but then it is quite a brutal sort of killing after that. So,
I mean, you know, there's definitely that, and then you know, as you mentioned, the kind of the antler killing stuff. I mean, there are some definitely memorable like kind of deaths and stuff, and I think that's the thing that kind of really, I think, is part of you know, the horror genre, where like different times, like the more creative the killing is, that kind of really is something that at least, you know, kind of shows like, I don't know, like it's trademark, I guess, and stuff.
And there's also just this kind of randomness as well that another bit that I really, really enjoyed was where he'd killed someone, and there's this little girl who's probably the family member. I can't remember who it was who got killed, but it was obviously the daughter. And you're there on the edge of your seat, maybe kind of sort of saying, oh no, he's going to kill the little girl in cold blood. But of course he doesn't, because he only kills those that would be naughty. And so not nice. So and you just think, what's he going to do? What's he going to do?
Right.
And he hands her a bloody box cutter.
Right.
And it's like, well, it's, you know, I can kind of see your logic of only killing evil people, but you know, a bloody box cutter is a bit of a half effort, really, isn't it? You don't really kind of have some great philosophy behind your moral killings here. It's not like Dexter, but so that really made me laugh as well.
And I think that's what you said is true, though, that it is pretty disarming, though, like kind of these moments that like there's some kind of tension, because like we don't want to see. I feel like we've talked about this before. Like we don't want to see like a little girl getting killed and stuff like that. Like kind of it's kind of, like, I mean, we had it in it was the what's called the Siege movie. I'm drawing a blank now.
Assault on Precinct 13?
Yes, Assault on Precinct.
Right.
Where like that was partially what was really shocking, was seeing kind of this cute girl getting like kind of blown away and stuff.
It's funny, isn't it? Something like this gets criticized for being exploitative, and I would have said that opening shot. And I know that, John Carpenter regretted, and he's been on record saying he regretted shooting that scene.
That's true.
But I mean, that for me is a far, far more brutal scene than anything in this, because, no kids die in this movie. No. From what I remember. Teenagers maybe, but,
Right.
That doesn't really count in an 80s slasher movie. It's part of the course.
Right.
And there's lots of sort of, various top. I mean, it's probably just a combination of the disarming sort of tongue-in-cheek comedy stroke bad quality with the really brutal murders and quite a lot of topless women being chased around that probably rang. I mean, again, this is like this whole thing of, explicit sex versus explicit violence in American film. And I would say Assault on Precinct 13 was a far more shocking and violent movie just for that one scene by itself than anything in this. But this does have at least 3 women who run around for quite a while with their breasts out. So that maybe sounded alarm bells for Siskel and Ebert. I don't know. But
and that's one. It's almost like a separate topic, though. That like I mean, we touched on it a little bit in I think with Halloween, that there seems to be kind of this weird kind of juxtaposition of that sex is like kind of leads to death, like kind of, and maybe there's some kind of Freudian reading into it and stuff, but certainly in the 80s horror, basically like, when you saw it's something that, Scream even kind of really poked fun at, is that like when you had teens kind of making out, like kind of, it was like just this, as expected, like in the next scene or so, they're going to be, killed by the killer or stuff like that. And this movie is definitely no exception. It's like kind of where it's almost like an expectation, I guess, that we have.
Yeah, I mean, in any 80s horror movie, teenagers are constantly having sex and constantly being killed for it.
Right.
Unless you're the 2 midnight sledging enthusiasts at the end of the movie who decide to go.
That came out of nowhere.
That was such a random scene. These 2 guys sneaking out in the middle of the night to do a bit of sledding on the sly, and hey, hang on, someone's watching them, and you think, oh, the killer's going to get them. But no, it's 2 badass midnight sledding enthusiasts who steal their sleds from them and then get really, really excited about sledding at midnight. And you just think, wow, I think I'd much rather be the guy who was having sex on the pool table than the guy who's getting really, really excited about sledding.
And the only thing I could think of too, that like we're, sometimes intentionally or unintentionally, this is almost like a metaphor for like kind of sexuality in the 80s, right? Where you had AIDS, like kind of, knocking you off, like kind of, if you were hetero and stuff. And then if you're gay, then it was like kind of, like even, like kind of even more like kind of, and maybe like the sledding, right, was like kind of maybe they're, this allegory for like, if you're gonna be having gay sex in the middle of the night, watch out, like kind of that's even more cause for like kind of your demise. The only thing I could think of too that like we're sometimes intentionally or unintentionally, this is almost like a metaphor for like kind of sexuality in the 80s, right? Where you had AIDS like kind of knocking you off, like kind of if you were hetero and stuff, and then if you're gay, then it was like kind of like even like kind of even more like kind of and maybe like the sledding, right, was like kind of maybe they're this allegory for like if you're gonna be having gay sex in the middle of the night, watch out, like kind of that's even more cause for like kind of your demise.
Maybe in circles in that was a euphemism or something.
Right.
Do you go sledding at midnight?
Yes.
But yeah, so that's another very odd choice, really. But yeah, I mean, I think you kind of. I think what's quite funny about this is that you do kind of feel sorry for Billy, and you kind of expected the nun to do a little bit more. You kind of felt like she might play some integral role in, bringing him back to the side of sanity, but it never really kind of happened. She was just there to sort of say, "Oh, watch out for this guy who may or may not be a serial killer," just to let you know.
Right. Yeah, I guess we should mention that there's this kind of good nun, bad nun thing going on too. That there was a Sister Margaret who was basically trying to, see the good in Billy and trying to, bring it out in him and everything. But meanwhile, like kind of, the Mother Superior was like kind of, damnation and fire and brimstone. Like his soul is damned anyway. So
yeah, punishment is good. Punishment is necessary. Right. And all this kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you saw where that was going. I'd say that kind of takes me back. I mean, one of the prefacing things I like in this is when they're driving in the car right at the beginning, and everything that the wife says basically prefaces the entire concept of the movie, in that she's just sort of, they're saying, there's nothing to be scared of when Santa Claus comes round, and, and all that kind of thing. So, but yeah, I mean, you're right. Good nun, bad nun. You've had a bad cop, good cop. In this, you got bad nun, good nun. So it's not something you often see. I mean, the ending. It's funny. There were lots of very memorable parts of this movie, but I can't really remember what happened at the end. I think he got shot. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty anticlimactic after everything and stuff. I mean, it was kind of basically the axe poised over Mother Superior and stuff, and it almost, I don't know, like to me, like almost in a way, like would have been more dramatic if like he did kill the nun and stuff like that, but of course, like kind of he gets, major spoiler as always. He's blown away at the last minute and stuff, just before he axes the Mother Superior. But I thought what was kind of like, on the one hand, like kind of, if there was any exploitation, it's the fact that like they kind of like hinted at that there's a sequel because the brother apparently like kind of had a gleam in his eye, like kind of like like kind of basically just repeats like kind of naughty, like like, which was the kind of like. If there's any catchphrase, like, I don't, but hinting at that, like he's going to be the next one and everything. But other than that, I mean, there's really nothing kind of that memorable about it. I mean, it was, just the good nun, Sister Margaret was there to kind of witness it tragically and stuff. And, I mean, just really like, a very forgettable kind of end to like a somewhat interesting movie, I guess.
Yeah, and you would have thought it would be more memorable, Santa Claus getting gunned down in front of some nuns and an entire room full of children.
Right.
And when you describe it like that, it sounds quite shocking. But after everything you've seen previously, it's almost completely forgettable for some reason. So, yeah. Speaking of almost completely forgettable, I guess that's probably a good time to move on to
the remake.
The remake.
Yes. So here we have one that's it's set in more modern times and everything. I thought that was interesting that they hired Malcolm McDowell like kind of as this kind of this more. I mean, if you can throw every possible cliche of a sheriff and stuff, I mean.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
That's who you have in this case, the 2012 remake.
See, I would say pretty much everything of this remake I hated except for Malcolm McDowell's performance.
Oh, interesting.
Which was just the most ridiculous thing I've seen.
Okay.
And I mean, it was just like, it was, the funny thing was, it was so kind of self-conscious, this movie, that when he first appears, every time he appears in this movie, there's like this sort of twanging of a bass guitar going bam, bam, like sheriff's turned up, and he just sounds like a kind of a gruff English news reporter version of CSI guy. Is all I can't remember what his name is now. The red-haired guy from CSI Miami. Every scene is punctuated by a pause and kind of a very hackneyed, catchphrase or, trope that we've heard a million times before. So
it just seemed like he was basically the two main characters from Halloween, right? Like he was both the sheriff and the doctor, and they kind of okay, rather than having budget for two of them, we'll just make them in one character.
Yeah, we'll merge them. Yeah, I mean, if any of the viewers have ever watched Brass Eye, which is an English comedy show, there's a sort of a news reporter that is kind of a pastiche of a sort of a kind of reporter you get in England called Ted Moore, who speaks a little bit like this about absolutely everything. And that's how Malcolm McDowell delivers every single line in this movie. My favorite line in the entire movie was where Jaime King is kind of trying to suss out who the identity of the killer is, and he says, "Don't put avocado on the burger." And she's like, "What?" As anybody would. And then she comes up with another explanation. He goes, "And now you're putting hummus on it too." And that was the moment where I was just like, "Oh, this is really like one of the finest performances from Malcolm McDowell. This was a work of genius." Yeah. I mean, every single line was like, "I know you're not up to the job."
Right.
Every line was like that. It was just brilliant. It was like the director just kind of said, just do something really aggressive and stupid sounding for the entire movie and pay no attention to what is going on with any of the other characters. Just do that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you're giving, kind of these folks more credit than they deserve or stuff like that. Because to me, on the one hand, it seemed like they were trying to be kind of, serious and trying to, we're trying to make a real horror movie and stuff, kind of with the opening sequence kind of being right away, they got to have the dramatic kill and stuff. And then they kind of have to leave kind of some clues as to what's going on and everything. And meanwhile, to me, Jaime King, I thought she was actually really trying to kind of be this kind of dramatic character that you really root for. And so that's what I mean. I would buy that, this is kind of like a what's called a parody on itself and stuff like that. If it wasn't for all these different efforts and everything, to me, that's why, I do agree that Malcolm McDowell is more than capable, really, just having fun with his role. I mean, having watched him in many different things, I would say that's the case and stuff. But watching some of the other folks, it just seemed like they were trying to pull off some, kind of drama and tug at some heartstrings and stuff. But they in the end, just kind of had this kind of kind of mishmash, I guess. Yeah.
It was kind of like Jaime King's character seemed to be the only one that wasn't getting the joke. But I mean, the writing, that was the problem really, was that it didn't really go, it was a bit sort of self-conscious in idea, but not in the dialogue. You almost get the feeling that Malcolm McDowell turned around to the director and said, "Is there any way we can make this dialogue a little worse? I think it feels a little too authentic in this moment. I think we could make it a little more kind of cliched." But yeah, you're right. She really did put the effort in, and it didn't work. It was quite a reasonable cast, really. I mean, Jamie King's pretty good actor as Malcolm McDowell, and I can't really remember. Ellen Wong has done some quite decent stuff as well, I think.
She was in Scott Pilgrim in the Versus the World. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then more recently in Glow, actually, she's done a really good job in that series.
Right. Yeah, she was in The Circle, I think. Not that it's a great movie, but yeah. But you know, she's got a sort of a bit part in this, and again, she's playing it fairly straight.
I mean, she had a couple of punchy lines and stuff, so that kind of made me think, like kind of what's called that it could have been in the direction that you were saying and everything. But the problem though is that like it was more like that she was playing like kind of what's become a new trope, like kind of the snarky Asian, like kind of assistant and stuff like that. I mean, I feel like that's something like now we're starting to see like, in almost every other, like kind of town where they wanted to, or movie where they wanted to show that you have a small town, but we have some diversity and stuff.
Yeah, right. And I mean, it's so cynical, this movie as well. It's like everyone's kind of snarky and cynical and depressed and bored about Christmas. So it's almost like, the marketing department when they're pitching the story is, we're just going to pitch this to everyone who hates Christmas. So absolutely every scene is going to be really cynical about Christmas, and no one's really going to enjoy a moment of this movie. Like the Santa who's talking to the kids is trying to go on some anti-capitalist kind of rant, and and the humor's pretty dire, and it's like every Santa seems to listen to kind of like really bad sort of death metal or something.
I think there was an opportunity. Like if they really wanted to do like a parody of it, they could have really had fun with it. It could have been something that like, really would be, like genuinely entertaining. That like, and I think like, just like you said, the kind of the snarkiness and the darkness of it, like kind of that really takes away from it. That like, if you're going to do something that's very much a parody on, the original Silent Night and stuff like that, then you can kind of just really poke fun of it. Like, okay, hey, we know this happened in the original, but this is the way we're going to do it and stuff. Like the antler scene, right? Like that's something that like they clearly stole from the original stuff, but they just kind of did a very straight kind of, it just almost like kind of repeat of like kind of what was done and stuff. Rather than like kind of taking the opportunity, kind of like, maybe like kind of, he tries to hang her up, but she falls down, kind of he puts her up again and stuff like that, or, like kind of something like that would have been, entertaining, like kind of, that like, just something that like where they played with like kind of, hey, we know this happened in the original, but, like kind of, this is like kind of, we're kind of having fun with it and stuff like that.
Yeah. But I mean, in order to have like the comedy and the shock of doing that kind of approach, you need you can't have every character being cynical about Christmas, because then it destroys any of that contrast.
Yes.
So that, and then, this town is full of sort of like, girls being photographed for some random foreign website and taking drugs. And it's like everyone was just so cynical and downbeat.
Right.
Which leads me to one of the stupidest moments of the movie, which is when the killer is after one of the girls, and there's quite a lot of topless running in that scene. Again, then we get a good almost 5 or 10 minutes of topless running. So it's keeping in the spirit of the original. She's by the wood chopping thing, and she's escaped from the killer.
Right.
And then she just stops running and decides to, hang on a minute, I'm going to have a look around. That guy who was mercilessly killing people, I think I better just pause for a second, just have a look around. Let's just take a breather. Like, why would you do that? And also, if you were an enormous man, as described in the movie, in a red Santa suit, how could you possibly hide behind a Christmas tree? And not be seen? It's like that's like the most impossible stealth kill in the movie. But yes, that was pretty silly.
Yeah, I mean, overall, like I feel like it just was a lot of missed opportunities. Like like just they could have really, if they were really like kind of wanting to do like kind of a self-aware but kind of poking fun at kind of the original stuff like that, then I mean, to me that's partially what really works with like something like The Naked Gun, kind of with Leslie Nielsen stuff. He's very much like he's not trying to be funny. He's trying to be very much like do his job and stuff, but just like kind of like the classic Clouseau, movies with Pink Panther. It's the fact that like he's not like the movie is aware, but the character is not aware of themselves being like kind of so bumbling and like kind of and I think that's kind of like where if playing that straight actually works rather than trying to be funny and stuff.
Yeah, I think as well to do that kind of having something that's kind of parody or more interesting with this kind of remake is actually to make it more violent, almost to the point of it being absurd.
Well,
and they touched on it a little bit. Like I did like the Christmas lights and the eyeballs exploding at the beginning.
Okay. And the flamethrower, I mean that was kind of actually came out of nowhere, stuff like that, but almost like kind of like almost ridiculously out of nowhere. That like all of a sudden he whips out a flamethrower. Where did you get a flamethrower, dude?
Yeah, I mean that was definitely unexpected, but I think there could have been. I don't know. I think they just the kills could have been more ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that would have salvaged this movie, I think, perhaps. And making a few more of the characters more sincere.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, I mean, I felt like that's kind of what, again, kind of worked for me anyways. I kind of was, Jamie King was trying to be sincere, but I think the problem though was that like, it wasn't with a self-awareness though of like, like we're trying to do something like kind of, I mean, I feel like she was like really trying to be the heroine, trying to be, like a really good, final girl, something like that. And I think that's the problem though, was that like, if we were trying to do a movie that was going to poke fun at the original, stuff like that, then you can't like kind of try to split the difference, I guess, and stuff, and because then it's in the end you just have I think what you end up with here is kind of a mishmash.
Yeah, you can't have Clarice, fighting SS Nazi werewolves on the moon. It's just not going to work.
Right.
So yeah. Yeah, missed opportunities definitely in this movie, I would say.
Well,
and the other thing I was going to, there was one last thing I wanted to say, and that is, this was very much, and this is kind of, I think, where you can split the difference between horror movies, where it's kind of has this kind of cynical, postmodern, exploitative kind of torture porn angle, which I think this kind of veers more towards, and the kind of grindhouse violence that's so violent that it's actually kind of funny, almost like the Sam Raimi, Quentin Tarantino approach. And that is the way, it's basically the element of torture, because we're kind of in post-Saw territory here with this one.
Right.
And so he's torturing these victims as well. And for some reason, I don't think that plays that well into trying to do like a slightly tongue-in-cheek horror movie. I think you almost have to have that immediacy of a death that goes way, way too far and is kind of almost to the point of being silly. Again, like a joke needs to be immediate. And I think the killings kind of need to be more immediate and not so premeditated in order to be funny in a kind of a movie, if you know what I mean. I mean, still, it did have the antler killing though, which was good. I'm glad they brought that back.
But yeah, I mean, I think like kind of when you're putting somebody through a tree, kind of shredder stuff, it's really hard to make that funny. Like kind of, I mean, because it really drags it out and stuff, and just like kind of it was just painful to watch. Like kind of, and I think that's the thing that like we laugh at something that's painful, but then like if it's when the what's called the Roadrunner gets away, or like kind of that Wile E. Coyote kind of just it's immediately over or something like that, and but if it's kind of dragged out, it's kind of like not so funny then.
No. I mean, the funnier way to do it would have been have it as some like really big industrial one, where he almost like throws her in and she immediately just splats out as a load of blood over like a church billboard or something like that. You know, that would have been a way to make it a little more kind of comedic and immediate, perhaps. But
yeah, it's now that we're talking about it, it really is funny because you had, on the one hand, I'm thinking about like kind of Monty Python and Holy Grail, right? We have the holy hand grenade, and it's funny that like this rabbit kind of just tears through everybody and stuff. You know, like kind of it's hilarious, and but it's like kind of just a shock, and it's kind of really just, you know, happening really quickly. On the other hand, though, what really works with the Black Knight though is like kind of, you know, the fact that like he walks away, like kind of, you know, like he's torn apart, but he's okay in theory, something like that. So I think that's what's kind of like where the two things like kind of have to, you know, you have to kind of go with one approach or the other. That, you know, either you have, you know, Roadrunner or Wile E. Coyote. You can't, you know, like kind of just you can't mix the two and expect humor to come out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any other insights on this movie that?
I can't say I had too many, to be quite frank.
Yeah, I couldn't think of much, to be honest. The music was mostly awful.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose they kind of had it was interesting that they didn't have the backstory immediately at the beginning.
Oh, that's true.
And they kind of just sort of tack it on the end.
Right, that was kind of weird.
They also kind of like, again, going back to the kind of the Saw way of making horror movies, is that he was giving gifts to the people he was getting revenge on, but there wasn't really any kind of coherency to that, because apart from her dad, there wasn't really obvious why these other people were being killed. So it was kind of like, oh, he's got a pattern, he's got a thing, but he didn't. You know, that didn't really make any sense at all, other than to throw in the scene with her dad. So
yeah. And that, like, kind of, I think that tacked on ending was, like, kind of, in theory, trying to make it where, like, there was some kind of connection that we didn't see and stuff, but I'm sorry, didn't buy it at that point.
No. And also, you know, the mayor's daughter, Tiffany, that whole scene was very muddled, because she's like, well, how did you get from the bathroom door to here so quickly? And then he's like, well, I went that way, and but I didn't see you go across there. And it's like, God, you're spending like a minute trying to explain to us something that you could have just done visually, but just done it better in 10 seconds. You know, it's just stuff like that just sort of fell very flat when watching it, really.
Yeah, I mean, just overall, like, kind of what once again could have been something, you know, more like as a remake and stuff, but left a lot to be desired, I guess. It's probably what. So I think what's called coming up, other than like we've talked about watching the right stuff, what was original movie and then remade as a series of stuff. I was thinking that we might do some you know, kind of winter themed originals versus remake and everything. There's one horror movie that is kind of that way, is the one with the child vampire and everything. You know, that's kind of an interesting one that was redone with Chloe Moretz as the what's called the vampire in the remake and stuff.
Yeah, I know that. I can't think of the title either, but I know the one you mean. Yeah. Right.
And then other than that, you know, at some point we've got to do The Shining, of course, and very much a wintry themed horror movie.
Absolutely. Yes, so, and it's, of course, it's very hard to do any new remakes of movies because nothing has really been released for the last year. So,
yes, this has been the what's called the year of the remakes, I guess.
I know, right? Yeah, it's interesting. Well, John, you've just turned green for some reason, so I guess that's probably as good a time as any to finish the show.
Fairly. So once again, I'm John Chang with Dan Edmonds, and we will see you at the movies.